The final confrontation draws ever closer. Patch 8.2 draws the battle lines within the Horde, allowing us to speculate on the faction's future and what players can expect for the future of the game, far past the time of this patch or even of this expansion. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft lore video. Patch 8.2 is on the PTR, and as always, this means that we have a lot of data mining to go through. So yes, there are going to be spoilers in this video. That's why the title was probably so grand and non-specific. We know a lot more about the future of the two factions, and importantly, it all prompts extremely interesting speculation. So we're going to be in for a wild ride as Blizzard set up a Mists of Pandaria-like situation, likely so that they can subvert our expectations and do something a bit big. And this video has a really funny backstory. My building almost caught fire, literally as I was writing about Jaina and Teldrassil Retribution. Yeah, so that was a bit weird, considering how underneath me is a Chinese restaurant that does barbecue and therefore has gas lines under the tables. That could have been quite bad. Anyway, that's why I look very underslept now, but the show must go on, so let's get into the lore. Okay, so we all know what happened with Saurfang and how Anduin let him pretty much kickstart his rebellion during the Lost Honor cinematic. I mean, it's pretty darn clear. Anduin says he cannot stop Sylvanas alone, and he leaves the prison door open. Then, of course, Bane later on went against Sylvanas by delivering Jaina's brother to her, leading her to imprisoning him in front of the rest of the Horde leadership. That move was designed to show that Sylvanas had complete control, but even during the aftermath of 8.15, it seemed to have the opposite effect, with most of the Horde leaders being, at the very least, worried about Sylvanas' path. Well, this all kicks into high gear with the next stage of Patch 8.2's war campaign. So, Anduin says that his spies have informed him that Sylvanas wants to execute Bane, so he asks Jaina to help break out Bane. Jaina is more than happy to do so given Bane's recent actions. Now, Jaina believes that Bane is really one of the last honorable Horde leaders left, and that because of that, he must be saved if there's going to be a sane new Horde in existence. Now, at this stage, Saurfang's rebellion seems to be pretty well known to Anduin and co, because Jaina, Matthias, and the player later meet up with Rolkan in Orgrimmar and get a stealth totem off him, so he's clearly on side. Then, over on the Horde side, Spirit Walker Uso has a vision of Bane's execution. Now that is then shared with a very concerned Lorthamar, who said that Garrosh almost severed his people's bond with the Horde, but that they held strong, and that this time his people would not abandon the Horde, but nor would they let the Horde be destroyed from within. So he tells the player to meet with their allies and rescue Bane. Now, by this stage, the Saurfang rebellion is clearly known to the disgruntled elements of the Horde leadership, those who are really, truly loyal to the original vision of the Horde, not Sylvanas' self-serving perversion of it. At this point, the Horde player seems to have an option to report all of this to Dark Ranger Linara, who then tells Nathanos, who then tells us to go along with the plan and that he will send word ahead, basically that he'll set up a trap. So both sides independently, but at the same time, decide to infiltrate Orgrimmar. Jaina and Matthias and the player are able to make their way past the guards with a little bit of resistance, destroying some new Horde Azerite mechs along the way as they move their way through Garrosh's old sanctum where Bane is being held. So that's the Alliance team, but the Horde team, well, that is the player along with Saurfang and Thrall. Yes, Thrall, he is back, and they eventually make their way through that area and they meet up with the Alliance. Tensions are still high though. They remarking the similarities between this and the Garrosh situation. Saurfang thinks that killing Rastakhan was wrong, but Jaina gets the group to snap out of it and focus on the mission at hand. So our party moves into Bane's room, where two versions of this scenario play out, both with identical events but slightly different wording. In one version, Bane knows that Sylvanas has planned a trap, so that likely is the one that plays for the Horde informant player. Otherwise, Saurfang comments that something feels wrong, and then they're all attacked. And they're attacked by the Sunreavers, which makes quite a bit of sense. They are more than happy to kill Jaina for what she did during the Purge of Dalaran in patch 5.1. Once again, we're seeing more of Mists of Pandaria really in this scenario. The Sunreavers, of course, are defeated, and once some inhibition crystals are destroyed, Jaina is able to teleport the team out. Sylvanas' trap failed, and now the Horde is in quite the position. It is abundantly clear that Saurfang is orchestrating a big rebellion, and that Thrall, a massive cultural figure for the Horde, is on side with him. Nathanos and Sylvanas now know that Lor'themar is involved, so you might be wondering, how do the dominoes fall here? Well, on the Alliance side, Gen and Jaina have a chat, with Gen being shocked that she would put her life on the line for a Horde leader. Jaina is able to calm him down and convince him that it was the right thing for her to do, and that peace with Lor'themar's Horde group in Nazjatar is the right move, because ultimately Ashara wants them divided. Though still, she does still say that there will be vengeance for Teldrassil. Ultimately, Jaina wants to slow down the fighting and focus on Ashara, knowing that time will only cause Saurfang's rebellion to grow, something that is especially true with Thrall being involved. Then over on the Horde side, well, Thalyssra is able to convince Lor'themar to hold back on fighting the Alliance on Nazjatar. Nathanos, though, telling the player once again to play nice with them, but that when the time comes, the player will be summoned. That's pretty darn ominous, and it's something that I'm going to talk about soon because I think it could be quite major. Now, as the patch progresses, Jaina and Lor'themar's forces begin to work more with each other, eventually being pretty much in full cooperation. Now, by the time the Nazjatar excursion is over, Lor'themar is convinced in the rebels' cause. He just is convinced that it's right, and he says he will return to his people, that he'll lay out the case for what he is about to do, and then he will join the rebels, praying that his people will follow him. And yeah, wow, there's just so much to break down here. Blizzard are doing a hell of a lot, but first, let's just talk about logistics. Because 8.3, well, that's going to be the final big raid of this expansion. Now, the theme of that raid will dictate the story, so there's a few different ways that Blizzard could take this. At first, we could face N'Zoth, which seems likely. Second, we could face Sylvanas in that raid. I'm not really sure if they could realistically pull her out as the final boss. As much as, a Lich King, Kali, and all that stuff has been played with by Blizzard, I'm convinced, 99% sure, that that is a future expansion, one that I'll probably outline pretty soon in the channel. So I think N'Zoth is a safe bet for the final boss, and if so, then the Sylvanas plot would have to be dealt with in patch 8.2.5, a patch that I think will be quite large indeed. Sylvanas being the final boss of the expansion would be kind of interesting, or just being a boss, that would be interesting. Indeed, every Warbringer has been an end boss, bar Sylvanas, but we do know one thing, it's not going to play out like Siege of Orgrimmar. Blizzard have said that she will not allow herself to be put in chains. They've said that it won't be a Siege of Orgrimmar version 2, and remember that Alex Afrasabi said that Sylvanas would think that the destruction that Garrosh wrought was pathetic. No matter what, there's going to be a showdown with Sylvanas. And regardless of the patch, it could still be a raid boss. Remember, Blizzard are totally fine to resolve plot threads with a small raid. So I wouldn't be surprised if patch 8.2.5 brought with it a 2-boss raid that had Nathanos properly die and Sylvanas either flee or unleash something terrible upon everyone who is present, and then, slip away as N'Zoth rises. I think the twist is that Sylvanas would be anti-N'Zoth, and that Blizzard would go for Lich Queen-like parallels, but have her be emotionally shaken by the death of Nathanos. No matter what though, Blizzard are going to struggle to resolve the player-facing aspects of this, and this is where the summoning that Nathanos mentioned, I think, is really damn important. So Nathanos returns to Orgrimmar, he teases a test of the player's loyalty and whether, will prove worthy of the Dark Lady, and all that. Well, I think that something major is going to go down here because he mentions this summoning. I think that with that summoning, the people who have been loyal to Sylvanas will be rewarded, and those who were not will be punished. How? Well, it's hard to know. It could coincide with a major rebellion action. You see, Blizzard's problem is going to be making Sylvanas a villain for the people who choose to side with her. It's pretty darn hard for them, basically, to reflect the player choice through consequences. They can't have those Horde's players temporarily be sided with the Alliance or, a third faction. I doubt they're going to do anything big and mechanical there. So there's going to have to be a way for Horde players who are sided with Sylvanas to fight her. Now that could be done in a raid through a flashback sequence, like with the Battle of Dazara Lore. That could have her being a mini raid, or just part of a major scenario, but by doing the flashback mechanic, having it be so that the players who sided with her could play through that content without having their choice be invalidated. And then they would resolve this whole thing by the new Horde giving clemency to those who sided with Sylvanas, allowing them to rejoin the Horde by the end of the patch, which would, be sort of recognizing their need to band together against N'Zoth. And that could pretty much just, tie a bow in it. What do I think about the new Horde? Well, I think quite simply, Saurfang's rebellion is going to be successful. I think Thrall will be installed as the war chief. I think we're going to end this expansion with both factions being back to normal. You know, a bit of tension, but not an overt war. This, I think, is practically a foregone conclusion. I mean, if you just run through the Horde leaders, it's so obvious. Saurfang and Thrall are like the heart of the Horde. Rexxar is also anti-Sylvanas, so all those old-school orcs, they'll probably be wooed over. Rolkan, the troll leader, is anti-Sylvanas, Bane is anti-Sylvanas, as is Lorthamar, Thalisra, and certainly the High Mountain. And just overall, there are more pro-rebellion leaders than there are pro-Sylvanas leaders. While she may have the people for now, by her control of information, the truth almost certainly will come to light. Perhaps that's what's going to happen during the player choice resolution scenario. Maybe Sylvanas will lose the support of her people in front of, you know, a Horde rebel army with Saurfang and Bane and Thrall at the head of the army marching up to the city. Basically, the point here is that the maths is just not in Sylvanas' favor. She has burned almost every single one of her close allies, and she can now only rely on the undead. Bar perhaps Overlord Geira, who was pro-executing Bane after the 815 war campaign, which, I mean, is a bit odd. But overall, the Horde is almost certainly going to reform, with its core old-school values being at its heart. Sylvanas will almost certainly not die. I think she'll take up a new position as a powerful death-related character for a future expansion that I'm pretty sure Blizzard is trying to establish. I think there'll be an award and an achievement. I think that will be the consequences for Horde players, depending on their choice, but I don't think there'll be anything that will last past what I'm going to assume is a period of amnesty that reunifies the Horde after the expansion. Then, just as a final note here, Sylvanas' plan sucks. Like, there's no way that trap could actually work. She knows how powerful the Rebels and Jaina are, so what? Is she playing some 4D chess here? I mean, we do have that shot of Derek's dagger from that cinematic that looks a bit ominous. The Sunreavers were clearly up to the task, so did Sylvanas want us to win? Does she plan to have the Rebels gain a Bane? Will this all play into a grand design? What, will she wait until they arrive and then attempt to plague nuke Orgrimmar? Have Blizzard watched so much Game of Thrones that they need to have their Mad Queen set off a massive green weapon in her own capital city? Regardless, it's probably going to involve Sylvanas trying to use Xal'atath, or something going on there. After all, she seems to view Xal'atath as a super weapon of some sort, based on her dialogue from patch 8.1.5, and of course those quests that, you know, just activated on live. Really, for me, the main question is, how will the Alliance respond? Will Teldrassil actually be avenged? Is that even possible? How will they do it? And given Blizzard's recent tease, how will the Alliance fracture? Because Blizzard have teased that. What will their internal conflict be? I actually have a pretty clear idea of what that could be, and how that could tie into a full expansion, but we will leave that one for another day, because I still need to do a lot more research before I can do it justice. But before that, I need to sleep, because it turns out almost having the office building catch flames is, you know, not really ideal. And I mean, the next lore video that I'm going to write is going to be touching on the old gods, and based off the track record of this one, where I write about Teldrassil and all of a sudden I look out the window and oh look, there's burning embers. So maybe if I do an old god video, I'll just summon in an eldritch god and that'll be the end of us. Maybe that'll happen, who knows? I mean, if I do that, you'll probably notice. Something spooky will happen. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and before I go completely loopy, I'm going to sign off and go to bed. Cheers, I'll see you next time.